Looking from up underneath the cab here, we've got two grease zerks tucked underneath here. We can see the first and the second one here, both marked with green decals on the 500-hour service interval. These grease zerks are going to grease the pivot point for our service brakes. As far as service and maintenance goes on the unloading tube here, at the bottom we got a gearbox, and actually to the side here on the left we've got a fill and check port, and up underneath the bottom we've got a drain port. For this gearbox we recommend changing the oil every 500 hours or annually. For maintenance on the engine transfer gear case, we've got a fill and a check port located up here. On the back left side of the machine here, I've got three drain valves. The first valve we got here, the decal is showing us our engine transfer gear case. It's going to have a service interval of 500 hours or annually. The second one up here is just going to be my engine. It's going to have a service interval of 250 hours. The third and last one on here is going to be my hydraulic reservoir, and it's going to have a service interval of 500 hours or annually. And to change that oil, we're just going to take a 27mm wrench and loosen off our valve. I'm at the back of my machine here. I'm going to show you how to check the gearbox oil for our rotor gearboxes. First off, we want to make sure that we change the oil on these 500 hours or annually. And we want to make sure we check them on a regular basis. To check, we've got a valve on both the left and right side to check our oil level, as well as our fill port. To change the oil then, at the bottom we have our drain port on both the left and the right side. Again, make sure that we drain these every 500 hours or annually. Also, while you're up here, go ahead and check your breather valve. Make sure it's free of debris and chaff. Here we've got an example of our V-belt tensioner. And on the tensioner we got a green decal with a 500 hours service interval called out on it. It's calling it out for the zerk on our pivot point for our tensioner. For each of the tensioners on both the left and the right hand side, you'll also find the 500-hour service interval. For location for all of those, please refer to your operator's manual. Here we're looking at the right side of the machine. I want to talk a little bit about our 2-speed reduction gearbox. First off, I want to show us a little orientation here. I've taken and installed my low range bolts and orientated my check valve and my fill valve like so. We want to make sure we check as needed, and we want to change the oil on a 500-hour or annual interval. In order to drain the oil, we can take and remove our low range and orientate our gearbox to drain the oil out the bottom. Here we're looking at a final drive here on the left side of our machine. I want to talk a little bit about the oil change and check interval on this. First off, there's a couple of components here. On the top side we got our breather. This will also serve as our fill port. Underneath the bottom here then we have our drain port for changing the oil, and we also have our check port for checking the oil. Make sure we check that as needed. Changing the oil is going to come on a 500 hours or an annual interval. Okay, so here we got a 3-speed transmission. I want to talk a little about checking and changing the oil on the 3-speed transmissions. First off, a couple of components. On the top side we got our fill port. On the side we've got our check valve. And on the bottom then we've got our drain port. We want to check the oil on these as needed, and we want to change the oil every 500 hours or annually. The 2-speed transmission will work the same way. Okay, so now I'm on the right side of my machine here, and I'm actually looking at our Gen 2 TerraTrack machine. And I want to talk a little bit about the service and maintenance on our gearboxes and our oil change intervals. First off, before I get into it, I made sure that I parked my machine on a level ground when I'm checking my oil levels. And working from the right side, everything I do on the right side will take and carry over to the left side as far as the checks go. First off, our port of interest at the front idler here, we've got a little grease well here. We've got a check fill port in the center, and we got a cap coming on the outside here with the bolts holding that cap on. In order to check and fill, we'll use our port. To change the oil, we want to go ahead and pull those bolts out, remove that cap, and drain our oil into our bucket. The interval on this is going to be at your 500 hours or annually. The other two we have to check and be aware of is our idler wheels. Both two in the front here as well as two in the back. Don't forget about the other side with this as well. For both of these checks, they're going to be at 500 hours or annually. And to check them, you got your little black cap, and if you feel around, you can feel your little Allen screw on the side of that cap. That'll be our check and fill port for these this particular system. And when you check that, you want to be sure you've got that fill port positioned at the 9 o'clock or the 3 o'clock position when you're checking it. Again, our check on those is going to be 500 hours or annually. The last point of interest we got here is the final drive, the gearbox for our track machine. Here we can see we've got our fill port and the check port for that gearbox. And tucked in the back here, we've got a threaded cap. It's actually going to be our drain port. Both the right side and the left side, again, are going to have the same interval, and those are going to be at 500 hours or annually. Looking at our Gen 2 track here, got a service interval here with a green decal marked with a 500-hour service interval. It's just a grease zerk here to grease our pivot point for our Gen 2 track system. Looking here at our Gen 2 track again, I'm on the right side. I want to talk about the drive splines and our U-joint connecting to our Gen 2 track. First off, it's recommended at a 500-hour or annually service interval to grease the splines on our drive shaft. Also then, while you're down there, go ahead and check your U-joints. Make sure that they're good, both the right side and the left side for this.